Hi and welcome to the first screencast in this lecture programme. Today we're going to introduce you to the module and begin with talking about the strategy process. Before we begin, I think it's worth just saying something about myself. My name is Chris Moriarty and I've got around 30 years experience in the sport industry. A lot of it to do with working with strategy for sport organisations. So I've worked for two cities in England, Nottingham City Council and Sheffield City Council. So these jobs were a bit like running strategy for, in Hong Kong, the Leisure and Cultural Services Department of the Hong Kong government. So I have around 12 years experience of working for city government in sports strategy. I've been a lecturer for 17 years now at Sheffield Hallam University, and during that time I've also worked on consultancy projects, working with organisations to advise them and to help them develop their strategies. And my first teaching job was quite a long time ago now, back in 1991 for the University of Chester. So I like to think that I have a lot of experience in teaching. I have some good experience in industry. A lot of my work and a lot of my teaching is around strategy. So hopefully some of my experience and some of my knowledge I can pass on to you and help you become good strategic thinkers and good strategic managers. So, what are the learning objectives for this introductory session? Well, the first is that I want you to understand that there are three key stages of the strategic management process. Right. So there are three key stages, and really we'll talk about these more, but very quickly they are external analysis, understanding what's going on outside the organisation and how that might affect what the organisation must or can do or cannot do, and how that will shape its strategy, its plan for the future. So the first thing is external analysis. The second key stage is internal analysis. An internal analysis is where the organisation looks at the resources, the skills, the money, the people that it has, and looks at where it has strengths in its resources or weaknesses. And if it has strengths, that will enable it to do certain things within its strategy. And if it has weaknesses, that will make certain things more difficult for it to do within its strategy. So part of its strategy might be, how do we overcome our weaknesses so that we can do things better? So internal analysis is the third key stage, and is the second key stage, The third key stage is strategic choices, when the organisation decides what options should we go for in the future? How should we develop our organisation? What direction should we move in? And how are we able to do that? So that's a very quick outline of the three key stages of the strategic process. We will talk about those more later in this lecture. The second thing I want to talk to you about is what are some of the key strategic management tools and techniques. So what tools, what frameworks will you use? Now, some of you may have heard of PEST or SWOT analysis or BCG matrix. Some of these tools we will talk about in the course of this module, and I will introduce you to some other tools that maybe you've not heard about before. And the third thing I want to talk to you about today is, why are we studying strategic management? Why is it important for students at Sheffield Hallam University and for managers in the industry to understand strategic management and be able to undertake strategic management tasks. So I want to explain to you why it's important, and I hope that that will help you get some motivation to want to do well in this module. And the final thing that we will talk about, and I will explain during the course of this lecture, is the structure for the study school and the module. So, if we think about the strategic management process, we can really summarise it in 3 simple questions. So, when an organisation begins its strategy journey, it asks itself, where are we now? Thinking about the external environment, what's going on outside our business, and how will that shape, constrain, make more likely that we're able to do certain things. So the first where are we now question is what's going on outside the organisation, the external environment. The second where are we now question is what's going on inside the organisation. What resources do we have? What capabilities do we have? Where are our strengths and where are our weaknesses? Because that will shape what we're able to do in a strategy. So external and internal analysis are about the organisation asking itself, where are we now? So early in this module, we will look at external and internal analysis. So you're able to say for an organisation, where is this organisation now? What is its position? What is it capable of? What opportunities and threats face the organisation? And what strengths and weaknesses does it have in order to be able to address the opportunities and threats that confront it? Okay, so that's the first question. Where are we now? The second question is, where do we want to be? And organisations need to have a clear sense of purpose, a clear vision of what they want to achieve, and a clear mission statement. So where do we want to be is about the organisation's understanding of what its purpose is, what it wants to achieve, and how it wants to achieve that. And that links into all kinds of things like culture, which also affect the way organisations will approach strategy. So some public sector organisations who maybe are funded by government, so a Hong Kong Sport Association, which is funded by the Hong Kong government to a degree, may not be totally free to say, where do we want to be? The Hong Kong government might tell it, if you want money from us, this is what we want you to do. So for some organisations, where do we want to be is handed down to them by some of the bodies that fund them, that give them money. For other organisations, which are private or commercial, they've got a slightly freer hand, but they still need to think about what is it possible for us to do? Because, for example, a football club might be limited by what its fans or its supporters want it to do, what broadcasters want it to do, what sponsors might want to do. So this introduces the idea of stakeholders, and stakeholders can limit this second question of where do we want to be. So that is the second question in this kind of strategic management process. The third question is, well, once we know where we are and once we know where we want to be, the third and obvious question is, how are we going to get there? And this really is about strategic options and thinking about the typical decisions and strategic decisions and choices which organisations make. So this module can be summed up simply in trying to answer these 3 but very fundamental, important questions for businesses and for sport organisations. These are a couple of more sophisticated definitions of what strategy is and what it means. I'm not going to read these out to you. I'm going to leave them on the screen just for a minute so that you can read them and try to understand them. If you want to, hit the pause button on your screencast on your video now so that you've got more time to read it. and take some time to try to understand what these definitions actually mean. We will come back and talk about these later on in the lecture programme. Okay, so we've talked about the kind of strategic management questions and what strategy involves. Let's start looking at this in more detail now by thinking about the strategic management process. So, what are the elements of strategic management? Okay, so first of all, we've said, where are we now? So the strategic position, what is our current strategic position? Where are we now? That is the first element. And the way we understand the strategic position is by analysing the external environment, what's going on outside the organisation, by carrying out internal analysis to understand what we are capable of, our strategic capability. And we also have seen that we need to understand what stakeholders, fans, supporters, funders, sponsors, broadcasters, politicians, what they might expect from us and how that shapes our purpose and what we do. Okay, so those are three aspects that help us understand the current strategic position. So the strategic position is about asking ourselves, where are we now and where do we want to go? The second element of the strategic management process is strategic choices. Where do we want to go? And in asking these questions, we've got to answer another set of questions. So the first strategic choices for an organisation is, how do you want to compete? Do you want to compete on price and value, or do you want to compete on quality? Do you want to be better? Do you want to have a better quality product with more features, better quality, better styling, more options than everybody else? Or do you want to compete on price? Do you want to make your product, your service, your gym membership, your pair of running shoes, your t-shirt, do you want to make that as cheap as possible in order to try to sell more? So that's one of the important strategic choices, and we'll talk about that later in the lecture programme. We will also look at what's called corporate strategy, and corporate strategy is about generating strategic choices which say, which businesses should we be in? Should we move out of some of the businesses we're currently in, or should we move into new areas? So if we think about Nike, Nike started life as an athletics shoes business. What is it expanded into? It's expanded into other sports. It's expanded out of shoes into clothing and into fashion. And it's expanded into wearable technology. So fuel bands, and other things. So Nike has moved into related areas. Well, how has it decided to do that? And why has it decided to do that? So strategic choices are about moving in and out of different businesses and ways that it's possible for organisations to do that. Once we've arrived at strategic choices and the range of choices that we've got to assess options. And assessing options means thinking about which of the options, the choices, might be the best for the business, the most likely to be successful, to deliver what the organisation wants. So, strategic choices about how might we get there, what's the best way, how should we compete. Now, the third element of the strategic management process we don't really look at much within this module because we don't have the time, we don't have the hours, but this is about strategy into action. So once you've decided on your plan, how do you actually deliver it or implement it? How do you control your plan? How do you make sure it's being delivered? How do you evaluate it? And how do you manage change? So this is about getting there. What do we have to do? How do we measure progress? But as I've said, in this module, we really consider the strategic position and the external environment, internal environment, and expectations and purposes. That is what we will focus on in weeks 1 and 2 of this study school. And in week 3, we will look at the strategic choices aspect. So week 1 and 2, we're going to be looking at the strategic position. And in order to be able to answer the question, where are we now? We're going to look at the external environment this week. And in week 2, we will look at internal analysis, trying to understand the organisation's resources, its capabilities, its skills, its money, its facilities, its brands, and to say, does it have strength or weaknesses in these areas? And I will also ask you to do a piece of homework about expectations and purposes. So that's weeks 1 and 2. Okay, now some of the key tools we will look at in week 1 and 2 include, for the external environment, PEST or PESTEL. And this is a tool which allows us to identify a range of external factors to try to identify opportunities and threats which face the organisation. Opportunities are things that the business can take advantage of to try to grow. Threats are dangerous to the business because it might limit or stop it doing what it wants to do. We'll also look at something called functional analysis, which will allow us to identify strengths and weaknesses. And functional analysis is something that we will look at in week 2. Once we've actually done external and internal analysis, external analysis allows us to identify opportunities and threats. Internal analysis allows us to develop strengths and weaknesses. We can summarise those strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats in a SWOT analysis. Okay, so SWOT analysis is a way of summarising the strategic position. What are the strengths and weaknesses that we have? What are the opportunities and threats that confront us? What is our current position? Okay, now, in week 3, then, we're going to start to look at strategic choices, how to compete, which businesses to compete in, and how to decide which options are the best for us. So, which tools will we be looking at? We're going to look at something called TOES analysis, which builds on SWOT analysis. So TOES analysis says, is there a match between any of our internal strengths and opportunities? So how can we build on strengths to pursue opportunities in the environment? How do we use our strengths to pursue some really good opportunities? How do we use our strengths to minimise threats? How can we use our how can we overcome weaknesses to pursue opportunities? And how can we minimise weaknesses that make us vulnerable to threats? What can the organisation do about these things? So we will talk about TOES analysis. We will also look at something called Porter's generic strategies, which is about how to compete. So how do some organisations become very efficient and minimise their costs? And that is the basis on which they compete. How do others at the luxury end provide extra features which customers will pay a premium price for? So how do they differentiate themselves to allow to charge a high price? And the final tool that we will look at, or the final set of tools that we will look at, are tools for allowing us to see how the organisation can develop into new areas. So BCG matrix, some of you may have seen before, and that allows organisations to understand which business opportunities or which business areas are more attractive and which are least attractive, and it helps them decide which areas of business should we move into, or are there any areas of business that we should move out of. And once we've arrived at our strategic options, we then need to think which of this long list of options that we've generated is the best. Because organisations can't deliver every single strategic option. It's like you, when you go into a shop and you see lots of things that you like, you can't necessarily buy everything because you don't have the resources, the money to buy everything. You've got to decide which are the best choices for me. So organisations have got to decide which are the best choices for us to take us forward. We can't follow every single strategic option. We've got to try to decide which are the best options. We've got to screen out the worst options and choose the best options. Okay, so in weeks 1 and 2 then, when we're thinking about strategic position, we're going to be focusing on making use of information sources to help you identify a wide range, lots of external and internal strategic factors. So there's going to be a lot of information which you're going to have to deal with, and you're going to have to develop your analytical skills to be able to think that from this wide range of external factors, what are the small number of most important internal and external factors. And at the end of this, you're going to be able to summarise this in a SWOT analysis, which is a summary of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats which face the organisation. You are going to choose an organisation for your assignment, any sport organisation, probably based in Hong Kong, or look at its operations, its business in Hong Kong, and you're going to do your assessment around that specific sport organisation. When it comes to week 3, you're going to be thinking about some strategic choices. How can we grow and expand? How can we enter new markets? Are there any opportunities for us to develop new products? Do we need to change the way we operate our business? Do we need to move from a low cost to a high cost business model? Are there any areas that we need to get out of? So do we need to downsize the business and move out of some areas, close down certain gyms, stop offering certain product lines for certain markets? Do we need to reduce our costs? Do we need to invest in certain areas? So Hong Kong over the years has made a big investment in facilities to host events and conferences. So it's made that investment to make itself Asia's world city. That's part of its brand. That was a strategic decision, but it required a lot of capital investment into facilities and infrastructure to be able to do that. And we will ask questions like, should we merge with other organisations or develop partnerships to help us achieve goals? So some famous collaborations are things like Nike and Apple working together to develop Nike Plus trainers and Nike Plus equipment. So we'll talk more about those kinds of things. Okay, so I've talked to you about the strategic management process. I've talked to you about how this will fit into the study school and what we're going to look at. So why is it important to look at strategic management? Why is it important to study it? Well, a central objective of strategy and studying strategic management is to understand why some organisations succeed while others fail. Right? So this organisation is going to really help you develop a deep understanding of business and management in general, not just part of it, because businesses don't just succeed because of marketing. They succeed because of marketing, but hiring the right people and developing them, HRM, finance, having sound financial processes, having good research and development. It will help you understand the different functions that an organisation must perform and perform well in order to succeed. And it will also help you understand how the environment, the external environment, makes it far more likely that some organisations will succeed and far more likely that some organisations will fail. So, why else is this course important? Well, strategy is the most important. Everything else in business follows from this. So strategy is the high level thinking which sets the overall direction for the organisation and which people and departments within the organisation must follow. Okay, so strategic planning saves effort and trouble. Work hard, work smart, not hard. So focus on doing the right things and doing them right rather than doing the wrong things and not doing those things right. Okay, so strategic planning and management helps you focus on doing the right things. What are the best opportunities for us to follow? What's the best match with our strengths? Make sure we do those things, because if you're following a strategy which is built around addressing threats and trying to overcome weaknesses, that's going to be a very difficult strategy for you to follow. So make sure that you kind of have a strategy which builds on your strengths and pursues the best opportunities. Okay. Good strategy, quite simply, is a prime cause of business success, and bad strategy is a prime cause of business failure. Okay, so why else is this course important? Well, from your personal point of view, you are students taking this course. You're making an investment in yourselves. Now, you're investing in this course because you want to have a good career in sport which interests you, but also a career which allows you to progress and have a good income, make some money, which allows you to be comfortable in your life. Now, the higher you move up the organisational ladder, the more senior you become, the more money you are likely to earn. Now, it is a fact that good strategists rise to the top in organisations. So strategic skills are rare skills. They are high order skills, and they are skills which employers will pay a premium for. If you look at many job adverts or vacancies for senior positions, you will quite often see things like must be a good strategic thinker, must be an adept strategic manager, you must show a strong record in strategic thinking and management. And these are features of high paid executive roles. So it's important because it gives you the skills and the insights and the knowledge to be able to advance your career. Also for organisations, investors, funders, people putting money into your business want to invest in good strategic plans, organisations with good strategic plans. If you haven't got a good, clear strategic plan which you are able to communicate to them, they won't invest in you. If you have got a good plan, a good strategy, and it's sound, it's based on sound principles and good understanding of your organisation, its place in the industry, the external factors, and you choose the right strategic options, then investors will have faith in you and will invest in you to grow your business. And finally, in terms of why this course is important, it will teach you not just about business in general, it will teach you about business in general, not just one part of it. So this isn't about marketing or operations or HRM, human resources. It cuts across all of those things. An organisation's strategies have got to say how marketing, how human resources, how research and development, how operations all contribute to the success of an organisation. Okay, so this document or this slide shows you that good strategists rise to the top in organisations. So this is about the involvement in strategic management, and we can see that supervisors and operators, junior staff, lower paid staff, less experienced staff tend to be involved in daily management. What does daily management mean? So daily management in a gym might mean opening and closing the facility, making sure it's clean, making sure that the lights are switched on, making sure that the water in the swimming pool is at the right temperature, that the water is clean, that the prices are clearly displayed, that customers' questions are answered. Okay, now, as you move up, managers are more likely to be involved in longer term, more strategic plans, which are things like the business plan. Where is our business going to go in the next year? What are the objectives for it? How can it achieve this? Maybe sometimes the time horizon is slightly longer and managers are involved in thinking about, well, how do I need to manage in the next 2 to 3 years? So managers have more involvement in business planning and longer term planning and less involvement in daily management. So they spend less time cleaning, they spend less time dealing directly with customers and more time planning the business. Now, senior managers may not be responsible for one gym. A manager might be responsible for one gym, but senior managers might be responsible for a group of gyms or a chain of gyms in Hong Kong. And they might be asking questions. They're not really asking questions like, are we opening? Is the temperature right in our swimming pools? That's important to them, but they're spending more of their time thinking, how many gyms do we need? Have we got the right kinds of gyms? Do we need to open more gyms? And how can we raise finance for that? Which way is the market going? Do we need to invest in new equipment in our gyms to make sure that we are ahead of the trend and offering customers what they want? How can we invest that? So strategic management for senior managers is about the long-term direction. Where do we want to go? Where is the market going? What are the trends? How do we respond to those trends? So that is strategic management. And if you develop these skills about understanding strategy, you are more likely to rise to the top of this pyramid, to the top of your organisation, and become a senior manager. So to conclude this first lecture and screencast then, in this session, we've said that for the purposes of this module, we can think about the strategic process in 3 stages. We've talked about what external analysis is and how that is about what's going on outside the businesses and how the external environment has issues and trends which present opportunities or threats to businesses. The second stage in the strategic process is internal analysis, and this is where organisations look inside at themselves and think, what do we do well and what do we not do well? What resources do we have? What people skills do we have? What brands do we have? What facilities do we have? What product lines do we have? And are they good or bad? What are the strengths and weaknesses in those areas? Okay, so internal analysis. Yeah, and 1 and 2 together help the organisation understand its strategic position. Where are we now? Are we in a good position because we've got more strengths than weaknesses? And are we in a good position because our external environment provides us with more opportunities or threats? Are we in a bad position because we've got more weaknesses than strengths when we look internally? And when we look externally, we are faced with more threats than we are opportunities. Okay. And then we talked about the third stage in the strategic process, which is about choices and decisions. So which businesses should we move into? Are there any businesses we should move out of? And how should we do that? Should we do that by ourselves, through an alliance? Do we need to merge with or take over another organisation? Now, the assessment, the assignment for this module reflects these 3 stages. And as we come to the end of this first screencast, I will say that the next screencast that you're going to look at and the next screencast that you will find in your Adobe Pages workbook for this week will be about the assessment for this module and how the assessment for the module is based on those 3 stages of the strategic process. Thank you And that's the end of this screencast.